everyone. Welcome back to Things We Read This Week, episode number 11. We're well into double digits here. My name's Jordan
Getting there,
Nanos. I'm
man.
back with Hunter Almgren. We got a big show for you this week. We're going to talk about some trouble at Intel. The hits keep on coming. Uh, Chinese models on Hugging Face, some personal experience there. Maybe get to GitHub Copilot and the future of AGI as usual. Gotta ruminate on the future of life and technology. Hunter, what'd you get up to last week?
Uh, well, actually, this week, I was down in Orlando, um, doing a with a bunch of customers, and it's always interesting. I love doing that event because everyone seems to have the same questions, right? You had a mix in the room of CIO, CISO, VP of infrastructure, right? So you kind of had a mix of all sides of it. And like, it's the same questions that I hear, like when you get to the AI topic, like, okay, how do I do this securely? How do
Mhm.
I, what are people doing that's really driving the majority of business value? You hear about all these use cases, and it's funny, one of the people attendees that were there who was a CISO, she pulled me aside and told me that she was so sick and tired of hearing every single salesperson come up to her and say that they have AI powered something that they're trying to sell her. It's even worse in the security space, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
And so, she said that she thought that my session was quite refreshing because I brought it down to reality as opposed to talking about, as I mentioned on a previous episode, building a stupid chat GPT endpoint into a shitty mobile app.
You're a tall, cold drink of water, Hunter. Sometimes I get it splashed in the face, but yeah, I get it. It's refreshing. All right. Well, let's get into it. So we've talked about Intel a number of times over the weeks and months, and the biggest thing that happened last week is obviously that their CEO, Pat Gelsinger, is no longer the CEO. Um,
Yeah,
the title of this article sums it up. Intel's CEO hasn't turned the company around, and now he's no longer CEO. They're calling it retirement. What's your take on this, high
he
level?
got he got forced out. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it is. The fact that there was no successor immediately named, there was no succession plan, meaning like Pat didn't stay on as an advisor to whoever's next, right? Like he was just like gone. And that to me is the board saying don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out, right? Like
Yeah.
he was forced out at the end of the day. That's my take on it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who are thinking about the downstream effects of this. Obviously, speculation about the success or the amount of investment and the amount of return there's been from um, Intel Foundry Services, IFS, basically them building fabs again,
Hmm.
leading edge fabs. And then speculations on sort of uh, the potential customers there, whether Intel products being the biggest customer is a tenable business model going forward. People criticizing the yields of test chips, people criticizing the use of government funding through the CHIPS Act and other services. Um, but I think the biggest thing that, yeah, here we go. Tech Power Up had a report that there's an 18A on their 18A process node, they're getting 10% yield. Like, you think this is what happens? They just make this report, yields low, Pat's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that could have maybe contributed to it, although given that we don't actually have like a hard confirmation of yield numbers where they are today at this point in time, people can speculate all they want that the yields were crap based on some offhand comment that Broadcom made, but we also don't know when they did a test run, right? I mean, we also have that could have been 2 years ago that
Yeah.
Broadcom decided to test out 18A and then go, oh, these yields are garbage. They could have vastly improved. I mean, we even see this with Intel, AMD, and everybody else when they release a new chip. I mean, yields even from TSMC are 50-ish% right off the bat, and they improve over the next 6 months, right? Where we get towards that 90+% yield out of a wafer. This is nothing new, right? So I don't know that maybe on paper, some board member who has zero experience in the semiconductor industry looked at it and go 10%. Well, why are we pouring billions of dollars into this? And like, this is
Yeah.
your turnaround plan? Crappy yields?
Yeah, but that's not, first of all, that's not why they bring him back basically on a 5-year term. And
Hmm.
then second of all, that's not justification to let the guy go immediately. I think
I
John
agree.
Carmack had the best take on this. Obviously, this guy's a legend computer programmer, right? Creator of Quake and Doom. He's let me just read the tweet. I'm concerned to see Pat Gelsinger ousted as Intel CEO. He wasn't a firebrand visionary, and it wasn't exactly going great, but he was deeply technical, and I don't expect his replacement to equal him there.
Yeah.
Business harder, quote unquote, isn't going to return Intel to greatness. Only technical achievement will. So there is no successor, but the point that there's no return on invested capital
Hmm.
into a multi-year, politically rough, you know, pursuit that's going to result in like fabs in Arizona and Ireland and whatever is
Ohio.
a, yeah, that's like, it seems to be, John's take seems to be like technical achievement on the leading edge nodes to fabricate. It would be undeniable, right?
Hmm.
If 18A was going well, they would have orders because it's not like NVIDIA and TSMC are best friends.
Right.
I mean, it's not like Apple and TSMC are best friends.
Hmm.
People consider them a monopoly. They would be looking for an alternative and using it if it was viable.
Right.
Um, but the result is that now, because in addition to that, now products is having a problem because, well, the report implies if 18A doesn't work, they got to redesign Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake for Intel because they've
Yeah.
designed it with the expectation the fab's going to perform. And now
Hmm.
you got to pivot at the last moment to produce chips at TSMC on 3 nanometer. That's
That's not trivial.
that would seem to be, uh, you know, basically the fab taking products down with the ship.
Yeah. And by the way, just real quick off topic, like I am definitely stealing business harder and going to start using that in conversations. Like, you need to business harder, son.
Forget about the tech. You need to
Yeah,
business
forget about
harder.
the tech.
Well, so one article that I just want to point to people to, if you care about the businessing harder piece, is from Fabricated Knowledge. This guy Doug O'Loughlin, who is just a great Substack, but at a high level, he does the meta analysis for a guy who's like all in on the semiconductor industry as an analyst,
Hmm.
like for investors, who should you buy if Nvidia does well in their supply chain sort of analysis. I thought this was just an incredible review of, to quote the article, title, When Boards Fail. Pat lost his seat because of an incompetent board. Let's meet them. And he goes through
Yeah.
one by one and kind of talks about
S-
who is on
s-
the Intel board, what he expects their contributions would
s-
be, things like that.
So before you actually bring that page back up,
Okay.
because I can't
This is an
help
interesting week to talk about board members and
I,
executives, man. I
I
don't know.
can't help but talk about, scroll down a little bit, a little bit more, a little bit more. Okay, stop. Let's talk about this guy, former CFO and EVP of operations at Boeing. I'm just going to leave that one out there. All right. Draw your
We've
own
talked about Boeing
conclusions.
before on the show.
We
Yeah.
did talk about Boeing before, and the term that was being thrown around at that point in time was systemic rot in regards to Boeing. And I had made the offhand comment about that maybe also applying to Intel. Guess what? I think we found it.
All right. I don't know if this is a personal indictment of Greg, but
It's not.
yeah,
No, it's
it's
not. All this article is really saying is that there's a lot of people on Intel's board that don't necessarily have his analysis is like, well, none of these people really have relevant semiconductor experience.
right.
Was what I took away from the article.
Yeah, Pat is like 40 years deep thinking about technology at Intel,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it operating at its finest and today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, his current tenure of work there is 1,386 days, which is the shortest of the recent Intel CEO tenures. Um, make it make sense, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I've got obviously like my opinion stated here that, he was pushed out by people who don't really understand how complicated a lot of this stuff is to pull off. And how much work that goes into it. I mean, you're talking about if I take a step back and look at what Pat was trying to do and getting funding from the CHIPS Act and like building these fabs in the US, like he's effectively trying to make the case for why the United States can be a semiconductor leader again, or
Well,
at all
and
for that matter.
maybe that's a mismatch, honestly. So,
Yeah.
like, not that I've, spent a bunch of time with Pat Gelsinger, but listening to him speak, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of armchair analysis, thinking about this stuff. I just want Intel to produce great CPUs and
Yeah.
some great PCIe GPUs that'll go in standard enterprise servers, and I think they'll sell a whole whack of them.
Hmm.
And there's been a bunch of forays into, you know, super large scale systems and then consumer devices and networking and drives and memory and like all this other stuff, which makes sense. But the core of Intel is producing great CPUs and some great individual GPUs, not these massive rack scale systems. And I think
Right.
there's potential for them to have a great Intel products business producing that stuff because there's a whole bunch of really, really great people here. But if you think about what's just happened, I mean, they just laid off 15% of the workforce,
Hmm.
right? The stock plunged. These are, business high level things where decisions made to the fab at the level of who's investing in what related to the fab impacts people's ability to do their job designing chips
Right.
and supporting customers who are learning how to use those chips for the first time with the new generation and writing software for those chips. Like um, geopolitics and building fabs in Arizona is not what is going to make people better at designing those chips. So
Hmm.
the last time we brought up these guys, we talked about them spinning off the foundry business,
Yeah.
and it just seems like Pat would be an exceptional leader at leading one of those two businesses, and anybody asked to lead both of them at the same time is in quagmire.
Yeah. I mean, I would even go as far to say that anybody who was asked to lead those two massive businesses could be setting themselves up for failure,
It's a
right?
turnaround in both at the same
Yeah.
time,
Yep.
which individually is a heroic feat for a CEO to pull off, right?
100%.
We're watching people try it at Boeing and GE and GM and like other industries and having a tough time of it.
Well, and I
Um,
look at or John, not GM, GE is a great example because they're involved in so many different areas, right? I mean, there's GE Healthcare, GE Medical, GE aerospace. They make engines for planes, and they also make a refrigerator. It's like it's crazy. The like, just if I look at the GE brand, like there's so much that they do, and so many industries that they touch, that some of them are like super important and super critical. Yeah, it's like how do you turn around 9 business units in 9 different industry verticals at the same time?
Focus,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, okay, you want to move on to I'd like to go to the Chinese open source AI models. I
yeah,
don't know,
sure.
not a great segue to get there, but um, yeah, you sent me this article and immediately jogged the memory of some recent personal experience. So, the title of it, Hugging Face CEO has concerns about Chinese open source AI models. And I think it's like if you're not following along, we kind of talked about this high level in the past, but a couple of models recently from different Chinese organizations, in some cases academics with very small clusters, rumors about the
Hmm.
size of their customers clusters, and obviously there's significant restrictions in place in terms of what anybody in China can get when it comes to GPUs, but um, like go through the models. Yi from O1, Quen, the BGE models for
Hmm.
embeddings, DeepSeek for coding. These are at the top of the leaderboards, and they are listed with, they're released with open source licenses, usually. These are either academics who are just so hardcore that they're doing something that the US and European researchers can't touch, or they are getting significant amounts of funding and releasing this for potentially nefarious reasons. Uh, the Hugging Face CEO, where which is the place where these models gets published, in this article describes some concerns. Um, so give me your high level take, and then I want to share a personal story of like how this can impact uh, why people might want to have security concerns about a Chinese model on Hugging Face. And it's just a model; it's just a binary file, right?
Well, forget the security concerns. I mean, one of the issues that Hugging Face's CEO raised in a podcast was the censorship aspect of it, right? And
Yeah.
so, he's basically saying, hey, if you create a chatbot using one of these models and you ask it about Tiananmen Square, it says I can't provide information on that topic. Where if I went to ChatGPT and asked it the exact same question, I'm given a bunch of information about that topic. That event in China is basically a no-no event, right? You don't bring it up, you don't mention it, right? Like that's historically been a thing for quite a while, right? And so one of his concerns is like, are we creating models that, um, what did he say? Like spread certain cultural aspects that the Western world would maybe not want to see spread. Um, and this kind of gets into like a whole topic of just in general censorship of models, right? Because one of the other articles that I sent to you that was very related to this is certain names that you type into Chat GPT basically break it.
Hmm.
And these were a few names that came up in lawsuits. So what they did was they more or less just said, we're going to create a filter that if you have any of these 5 names, I'm unable to produce a response. Like I don't want anything to do with it based on this, lawsuit. And so are we getting to the point where now instead of just having a model that knows, I'll put it in air quotes, everything and can provide responses to things, are we now getting to a point where like we're moving into the age of censorship where like and that's not even the way that OpenAI handled it is they didn't like create a I look at guardrails, right? You know how you can create guardrails on a model that says like instead of I can't help with that or I don't know about that, it says, I'm unable to give you the answer to that.
Hmm.
OpenAI didn't do that. They just straight up took like a freaking sledgehammer approach to it, and so it just says I'm unable to produce a response, meaning the model like cannot produce a response to that name.
Right.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah.
So I think that um, the CEO of Hugging Face brings up an interesting point about, you know, censorship in models might start becoming a real issue, and how does that shape, you know, the public's use of these models, right? Like take any average person off the street and they ask a question about something they want to know about, and they're basically met with either I can't produce a response or some weird pseudo political response that's meant to guide them away from the topic so they don't ask any further questions about it, right? Because you've seen some of that too in other countries.
Right. Yeah. I think your point is totally valid. I think a lot of this is it's interesting how people are being forced to build the stuff into the model weights itself, like kind of giving the model a lobotomy
Hmm.
after it's found some of this information on this topic, right?
Right.
The model itself, as opposed to writing some software to filter things in or out of responses on top of the model, which is kind of what guardrails does. The 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 trend seems to be that bigger model on more data is smarter, and any way in which you change the model weights itself has unexpected consequences. So filtering for stuff on top of model API is the way to restrict what people can ask about, monitor
Right.
users, do important things like that. Um, but I, I just I want to talk about like ease of use in this space because the security concern is my bigger concern. After
Hmm.
we didn't, I think this happened before we started this show, but after watching the whole stuff with the vulnerability in the XZ utility, the compression stuff on
Yep.
Linux that the guy discovered when running Postgres benchmarks and just kind of hero. Uh, Crazy story. Anyway, it's just turned on, switched something on in my mind that like I could be using stuff that's compromised every day on a Linux
Yeah.
system. And I want to tell a quick story about where this got me thinking. So I'm building a retrieval augmented generation application. It's a quick demo of what's going on in the current like product at work, right? And the point is to just chat with some PDFs. And so I'm going to fine tune an embedding model here. And
Hmm.
the point is that I needed to quickly pick a model to fine tune. And so I went to the massive text embedding leaderboard on Hugging Face, and I scrolled down the list. And the first concern was what is open? What model has an open license? I'd love to use this first one, NV Embed V2 from NVIDIA. It's top of the leaderboard. I trust these benchmarks. Unfortunately, it's a research only license, right?
Yeah.
Can't use it for commercial purposes. And so I go down to BGE, which I've used in the past. It's released by the Beijing Academy of Sciences, um, but everybody uses it. I trust it. Seems to be fine. It doesn't fit for fine tuning on the GPUs that I have. So I keep going down the list and I find this thing in number 3, number 4, Stella EN 1.5B. And so I pop it open and it's like, okay, great. Instead of being 7 billion parameters, this model is 1.5 billion parameters. And I run it and I fine tune on my system. And then I go to start building it into the inference API and it requires remote code execution.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what these researchers are up to, who Dun Zhang is, how this model got on the list, how it performs really well. Like, I don't want to trust remote code.
Well, yeah, 100%, and nor should you, right? I mean, that's like, you know,
What am I
remote.
doing? I downloaded this without even thinking about this, dude, just because it's easy. I'm supposed to be thoughtful about this stuff.
Well, and this is going to start bringing up a lot of questions about, we saw this in the mobile space, right? Apple was kind of a pioneer of like, I'm going to notify the user every single time an app wants access to anything. documents folder, camera, microphone, photos, location, right? Like, and I'm going to make sure that everything is disabled by default and it's opt-in only. I have to
Yeah.
opt in to give an app my location. I have to opt in to give an app my access to my photo library. Whereas here, the approach is I now have to opt out. Why does a large language model that is intended to be run privately need remote code execution?
Well, it's not, yeah. So the point is that the Hugging Face Transformers library has a certain amount of functions inside of it. It builds with
Mm,
PyTorch, it builds with Nickel, there's a bunch of stuff. And that's open source software. And so you need to contend with the fact that it's open source. It could have more vulnerabilities than something that's been scanned and is like supported
sure.
by an enterprise organization. And so the point is that a model with a new architecture may use some functions that are not included in the core Transformers library. It uses some new attention layer. It uses
Hmm.
something. Why are people developing this extra code, releasing it from China? How's the model getting on the leaderboard? I don't want to trust that code. Who's scanning this? Who's doing so? The CEO of the company that provides this model and provides the library that runs the model and the reference on how to run it is on a podcast saying he's concerned
Yeah.
about what his own company is doing. You know that Spider-Man meme where the guy's like
Yeah.
pointing
Yeah.
at
Where they're
himself?
pointing at each other. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, dude.
Yeah. Exactly. That's
How about you
exactly what
scan the
it is.
model that's number 3 and number 4 on the freaking leaderboard that you publish? Maybe they're doing this already. Maybe there's nothing to be concerned about. But like,
Well, so
yeah, I was not aware of this when I went through this, and I think more people should be aware of this.
no, I agree. And I mean, remote code execution is like its own class of security vulnerabilities. It
RCEs, yeah.
literally RCE is literally its own class of security vulnerabilities. So like there are CVEs released that says there's an RCE bug in Microsoft SQL or whatever the hell, patch now.
That was the
Um,
the xedutils one. That it was
right, yeah. So it's like,
through SSH.
are we supposed to now just think it's a feature, not a bug? Like, like just reading that, right?
This is the thing, man. There's been a trade-off from ease of use
Hmm.
in modern machine learning has come at the expense of trading off all sorts of stuff. Cost, people just use a bunch of GPU cycles they probably don't need to use. Um, and security, I think, are the two really big ones that are not. We talk about it a lot. Applying enterprise principles to AI
Yeah.
is a huge trend that you started the show with. Every CISO is trying to work with, because you have to contend with the fact that, like, if you tell a researcher they can't use Hugging Face text generation inference or like text embedding inference, the serving engine for these models, because you can't control whether they set trust remote code equals true on the flag
Hmm.
when they're running this thing, and you're just going to rule out any of these libraries. Like, you are protecting your organization and you're slowing down and upsetting your developers
Right.
who are just going to take longer to do the project or quit because they can't get their job done.
Yeah, and I mean this is the challenge that everybody had. You remember the term shadow IT,
Yeah.
where you had organizations who were not moving fast enough and getting users, resources fast enough, servers, storage, whatever it was. And so everyone just decided to use their P card on, AWS and grab some instances and they're off to the races without any knowledge of, IT. it it created basically a very real discussion in the industry about security versus hindrance of progress.
Hmm.
And this, I think, forced a lot of people to change and kind of move towards a infrastructure as code type mentality for a lot of organizations, just so that they weren't having to have that conversation or internal debate. All the while they were getting more comfortable with, oh, like if I'm a Palo Alto customer, I can extend my Palo Alto firewall policies to AWS so that like, you know, and keep them in sync so that anything that anybody decides to create on my AWS tenant is protected by my security policies, for example, right? So the industry kind of evolved along with that too to help alleviate some of those concerns. But once again, as the AI space progresses, we're now finding ourselves in yet another uncharted territory situation, where
Yeah.
now, see, what I'm curious about is what if you went and changed those flags to false? Would the model break?
Yeah. Yeah. The model just doesn't run.
It doesn't run? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you gotta, um, if you want to have only use code that's in the transformers library, which is certainly more secure than trusting anything people publish on the hub.
Sure.
Um, there's just going to be a subset of models you can choose. So it's just a filter. It's like first I filter for Apache 2.0 license, then I filter for trusting remote code, and now I
Yeah.
use that stuff and I trust that Hugging Face is not building in security vulnerabilities into their library, which well, that's not some organizations do not trust that either. So they need to build their own runtime. They need to not use transformers, et cetera.
But it
Like,
also opens the door for, you know, you've seen this a lot recently. You know, the example on the Linux side that you bring up is a great example of it. Software supply chain attacks, right? I mean, this
mhm.
kind of started with SolarWinds, where we didn't go after the software, we went after the delivery mechanism of the software. And so if somebody goes after like what's on, you know, what these models are connecting to on Hugging Face and poisons it that way, right? Well, you've left the front door wide open.
Yeah, it's
But again, to your point, and to kind of what we've been talking about, it's risk versus hindrance of progress.
mhm. Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of a three-way thing. It's like um, it's security risks, um, speed of progress,
Hmm.
and money you want to spend. Basically, there are people out there who know how to write and run their own inference runtime for a language model and do not depend on the Hugging Face Transformers library,
Right.
and maybe can even train an embedding model from scratch for themselves. So don't
Hmm.
depend on downloading one. You know, I am not one of those people, for example. I need to use an embedding model that somebody else has trained because
Right.
I got other things going on and I don't know how to do it. So it's like pick two of those three. You want
Hmm.
to do you want to go fast and not have to spend a bunch of money on the talent? Well, you're going to have a risk on the security side, right? You want to go fast and spend the money on the talent? You can probably not have a bunch of security risks, right? But it's a bit of a, if you, AI is just more, it's not cheap to get going with this stuff in a custom
Right.
way. Like we
Right.
keep coming back to the fact that it's a rich man's game to develop the models. It's becoming a rich man's game to run inference on the models. There's this point at which it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Don't do an AI project, save the money, lose the progress. Do the AI project, take the security risk, don't spend, a ton of money. Now you got to pay ransomware or something because you it's like you got a issue there. Like there's it's always going to be unique to a specific business, but there's
Yeah.
a conundrum that I think a lot of people are in where the AI strategy, most organizations are not sitting around saying my AI strategy is waiting for Microsoft to turn on the feature in my Microsoft 365 subscription because I'd like meeting summaries in Teams and that's my AI strategy. Most of them have
Hmm.
ideas of like stuff they want to do
Sure.
beyond core products and services they already have. So,
So coming out of this conversation, what I will be interested to see is, are you familiar with a tool called Qualys?
no.
So Qualys is a tool that's very common in the cybersecurity space, and it's essentially it scans code, software, whatever for vulnerabilities, right? So you know, for example, when I was working with a bank, right? They were going to deploy a management tool. They needed a Qualys scan, the management tool, before they were feel comfortable deploying it. And then Qualys spits out a report that says, hey, here's all the potential CVEs that apply to this product.
Yeah.
What I'm curious to see is if either Qualys does it or CrowdStrike or somebody brand new that's never been heard
Snick.
of before. Yeah,
Yeah.
comes out with a tool to scan models for potential vulnerabilities. And then does that even tie into, like, are we getting to the point where you're going to have CVEs for model vulnerabilities? Like,
Dude,
that's just a
well,
wild thought to have, right? Like,
this one's an easy scan for trust remote code.
yeah, well, I know it is. I know it is, but
False.
you see
I
where I'm
scanned
going with this,
this.
right?
Unfortunately, guys, your developer just released an application that has the flag trust remote code equals true in the config. This is a vulnerability. Well, thank you, Snick. Nice job on the scan.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like, no, but yeah, there's some of it does seem that simple. I think there's a cultural thing that's going to happen over time as people have this personal experience like I had. Um, that totally will do this. I think Hugging Face can do a lot of work because they're such an industry leader in terms of,
Sure.
you know, that's where people go, and that's people consider that nice emoji a nice trustworthy place to go and get your models. So like
So friendly.
maybe they put a nice Chinese flag next to some of the bottles on there or something. Bring in some emojis into the game. I don't know.
And then you can sort and filter by it or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I keep going back to the XZ utils thing because there's a few examples where this guy who when he was creating the vulnerability, Jia Jia Tang or something like that,
Hmm.
Jia Zhang maybe, was he was sending PRs to other projects in the like Linux source to get them to accept like um, the latest version of xedutils with the backdoor that he had put into it.
Hmm.
And I just remember looking at the Git uh, repo, like the comments on it when that PR came in. Somebody from Google is like, "Looks good to me." And then when all of this is hitting the fan, they have this response. In retrospect, this does not look good to me. I'll go see if I can find that. But
Oh, it's amazing.
oh, that was so good to dig in on that deep dive with what happened there. I really encourage people to go read about the retrospective that some of these guys wrote about how they
Hmm.
found this vulnerability, and um, it's like modern day Sherlock Holmes type stuff. It's really going on. So yeah.
So I think kind of the wrap up here that I want to end on is something that Sam Altman said a couple days ago that I think is going to be very relevant. So Sam Altman has lowered the bar for AGI, and his quote is, "My guess is we will hit AGI sooner than most people in the world think, and it will matter much less." I
Yeah.
told you so.
Yeah.
Is all
Victory
I have
lap
to
for you.
say. Like, exactly. Like, I'm gonna take a victory lap here because what, 3 episodes, 4 episodes ago, I said he's just gonna lower the bar and say we have AGI.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly what happened.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, he's trying to get out of the deal with Microsoft here.
I should go buy a lotto ticket, honestly. Like, I should I should go buy a scratch off right now.
Yeah. Does Polymarket have some forecasting thing for
Oh man, I
when
should look.
AGI
Can
gets
we
declared?
can we bet on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good take. I definitely liked it at the beginning. I think it's interesting the amount that AI is in we've said this before, that AI is in the zeitgeist and that the politics is driving the progress more so than the research. So let me contrast what happened this week with a release from DeepMind. So,
Real quick, before you go into that, I just wanted to show people there indeed is a way to bet on this.
oh man, but it's not paying. It's just Sam
It's
Altman
not,
not
yeah,
officially doing it. It's him speculating, not officially OpenAI declaring it. Yeah.
correct. Yeah,
Nice. Okay. Well, gotta get some action next time when we gotta put your money where their mouth is when you make these declarations in the future.
100%.
Year in review show coming up next week. We're gonna make Hunter make some predictions for next year about
And bet on them.
6 units on release of latest embedding model having a vulnerability by end of 2025.
Yeah. Or I like this other one that's on here. Chat GPT 5 will be released in 2025.
mm, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. Man, okay. Well,
Anyway, yeah.
let me pivot and give a little bit of a take on what's happening here. So, um, when I say there's a bit of a political game, like the current build out that's happening between um, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and X.AI is massive. Like, just so many GPUs being installed in these places, and we've covered, this a lot. The thing that's interesting about Sam making these comments is the speculation is that it seems like he's trying to get out of the deal with Microsoft because there's a
Hmm.
provision that if they achieve AGI, they no longer have to pay back all of their revenues to Microsoft. And this pivot from OpenAI being a um, research lab and a charity that doesn't want to make a profit and just wants to give a benevolent general intelligence to the world, to them being a relatively cutthroat for-profit company with a bunch of
Hmm.
executives leaving is fascinating. And the latest Trump announcement was to anoint David Sachs as the AI and crypto czar from this morning, I think.
That term gets thrown around way too much, man. Anyway,
Yeah, Secretary of AI
yeah,
and crypto. Why are we
whatever.
doing the
Czar.
Russian thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I say from Canada.
Yeah. Why are
On
why
this
he the better thing would have been why are you doing the czar thing?
bit of a royal weave for me and
Yeah.
Trump having Sachs nominated there. On this, as I stayed on this international Teams call that we got going on here. Anyway, so that happens, and Sam congratulates him publicly on
Hmm.
Elon's social media site X, formerly known as Twitter. The same day that uh, Google DeepMind has published like significant um, improvements in their weather forecasting models, right?
Hmm.
So the latest thing from them is they moved from GraphCast to GenCast, and let me put this up here. Um, a piece from December 4th. GenCast predicts weather and the risks of extreme conditions with state-of-the-art accuracy. Specifically, it's delivering accurate forecasts 15 days ahead using a novel high-resolution AI ensemble model. Um, which, if you've been in the world of high-performance computing and supercomputing a little while, you will know that the biggest supercomputers in the world are used to forecast weather.
Yep.
And if you haven't been aware of this, you may have also checked your phone or watched the news and gotten a forecast that was very wrong. So you
Yeah.
know that the biggest supercomputers in the world are not making a ton of progress. I mean, for daily life of people. And so this thing is just an incredible step forward and a testament to the fact that like Google DeepMind, the combined DeepMind plus Google Brain research trust that created the transformer layer that everybody else is stacking and running on a bunch of GPUs,
Hmm.
is still doing incredible research, keeping it secret and publishing it in journals like Nature. it's like it's a crazy um, comparison of we can talk about AlphaFold that's come from them. We can talk about all the advancements at Waymo. I commented on that, like
Yeah.
having that experience. Um, where is the research happening? Stack GPUs, train bigger model does not seem to be the fundamental step forward research that's going to impact human lives because I go from 93% to 95% on the MMLU benchmark for the
Hmm.
latest GPT 4.0, comma 1 Pro version December 17th
The $200
compared
one.
to right, yeah, I'm making it up, but compare that to like weather prediction is accurate up to 15 days ahead. Like there's these step changes that happen with research that are different than stack GPUs and stack data and run big training run.
Well, because that more accurate weather predictions 15 days out has a significant material impact on a lot of people and a lot of industries too,
Mhm.
you know? Um, I think everyone, like, think about, I can't tell you how many times I've had a flight canceled due to weather, right? And what if the airline knew about that ahead of time, right? What if I don't find out an hour before I'm boarding the flight that I can't go home?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, it's stuff like that, or like in industrial farming, right? Um, there was an article that I recently read about how farmers are today are knowing less and less when to plant and when to harvest because the seasons keep changing and when they change keeps moving around. So
yeah.
if they could have better data to know, you know, when to plant, when to harvest, when to, and all of that, like, I feel like that would make a huge difference to them.
Insurance companies selling
Yeah.
to farmers. Yeah, like this is the essence of research, which is you do something fundamental
Hmm.
deep in the weeds on the computer science world. You create the transformer model, and then 5 years later, 7 years later, downstream farmers have better crop yields, and there's 7 degrees to Kevin Bacon between that happening. But it's like it's huge, and I don't know. Seeing the GenCast stuff from DeepMind was really fun and encouraging
Yeah.
when it's being compared when it's compared to like the political posturing game that chatbots seem to be driving right now.
Hmm. Well, I
All right,
think
man.
that that about does it for this week, man.
Yeah, right on. Good job
Yeah,
again. Talk to you next
absolutely.
week.
And remember, everyone, business harder. See you next week.